Today, I'm going to give you the third official update on the progress of Planet X3, my real-time strategy game for MS-DOS computers. For those who are not already familiar with this, I created Planet X2 for the Commodore 64 last year, and then after the success of that, I promised to port it to MS-DOS machines. However, this new game has taken on a life of its own. I also launched a Kickstarter a few months ago, and hoping to get around 500 pre-orders or $30,000 worth of pre-sales, and it ended up with 2,548 backers totaling over $113,000. So in this video, I want to show you not only some of the progress that's been made since the Kickstarter video, but I also want to try to answer some of the frequently asked questions. And one of the most common questions I get is people wanting to know what language I'm coding it in and what tools I'm using. So to answer the first big question, even though I've mentioned it before, I'm coding directly in 8088 assembly language. So this is what the source code looks like. And I get a lot of people asking why I'm not coding it in BASIC or C or some high-level language. And the bottom line is I need the speed and efficiency to make this work on low-end MS-DOS machines. And as far as tools go, I'm really only using three tools. One is Notepad, which I write the source code in, and then I use a compiler called A86 to compile the code into machine language. So that's my second tool. And the third tool is DOSBox, which I use for most of the testing. Of course, I've had to write some of my own tools, which I'll talk about later. For bug tracking, I'm doing it very simple. I just have another notepad with a list of bugs that I've found, and when I find a new bug, I just add it to the list. And then I have a list of things that aren't bugs, but just stuff I haven't finished coding yet. Of course, this list keeps getting smaller over time. In fact, I can remove this right now as I just finished the Sentry Tank's code. And then I have another list of things that are sort of back burner. However, I already finished this one as well, so I'll take it off. So that's how I track bugs and what's left to do. Well, what about version control? Well, every day I just create a folder on my server and I call it snapshot and today's date. And then I copy all of the sources of binaries into that folder. And every now and then I need to go back and look at an older source, or if I really screw something up and just want to revert a subroutine back to the older version, well, that's how I do it. Nothing fancy, no need to use GitHub or anything like that. So what am I working on now? Well, lately I've spent a lot of time working on pathfinding routines. Now let me demonstrate what I mean. So if I tell my builder to pick up this rock, and then have a look at these walls over here, I'm using these for testing. So if I tell it to drop the rock over here, the builder has to be able to find its way around the obstacle. And for simple obstacles like this, it seems to be working. So here's a bit larger obstacle. Again, it finds its way around. Okay, so that's great for walls, but what about other objects? Well, let me drop the rock over here, and again, it finds its way. And this is good enough for the user-controlled units, but this same pathfinding routine will be used for the enemy units, so it has to work without supervision. Now, I want to show you something else. Pressing F1 will bring up a little cheat or debug menu at the moment, and what this shows is everything that is stored in memory about the unit that you're currently controlling. But also, you can use the arrow keys and scroll to other units and see all of their information as well. And if I press the G key, it will take me to whatever unit that is on the map. But this isn't just limited to my units. I can also look at enemy units. So if I scroll up to Unit 64, which is where the enemy units are, I can go to that one. And yeah, there's quite a few of those piled up here because they can't get across the water just yet. I'll be fixing that soon, but this is particularly helpful in troubleshooting enemy pathfinding. For example, I can watch a unit as soon as it pops out of the pyramid and starts trying to find its way to my base. Now, this is on a different map here. This is called Inferno. It's kind of a wasteland with a lot of meteor impacts. Now, this guy isn't having too much trouble navigating his way through this as it's mostly open space. Now I'll skip ahead a bit. Eventually, he gets to a part of the map where there are a lot of obstacles. At first, it looks like he can handle anything that comes his way, but eventually, he gets stuck. And the problem is, the base he's headed for is directly to the right of him, over about 20 tiles. But there's no way through the lava without going around something quite large. He's not smart enough to do this, so he'll just walk around this spot forever. And eventually, here comes one of his pals, and over time, a whole bunch of them will just pile up here. So how do I solve that? Well, a combination of ways. First of all, I can try to improve the pathfinding routine even more. The second thing I can do is change the map to make it easier for them to find their way. Ultimately, just like with my previous game, I'll wind up doing both. On the map side, I'll just start at the map editor, which is a separate program I had to write. That's one of those mini little tools I mentioned earlier that I had to create. So I'll tell it to load the map called Inferno, and here we are. So this is where the originating base was, and I made a note of the coordinates where the trouble spot was, so I'll just find my way over there. Yep, here it is. So I'll just go to the little tile selector and pick dirt, and then I'll place it here so the units can get through. So I want to talk about another technical challenge I faced. I'm really thrilled with how the CGA video looks. In order to try this out on some real steel, my friend the Obsolete Geek brought over his IBM 5155 portable. The internal display is monochrome, but it's still compatible with CGA graphics, only instead of 4 colors you get 4 shades of amber. But it actually looks really good. It's definitely very playable like this. And despite being a 4.77 MHz CPU, it runs decently fast as well. In fact, seeing this is part of the joy I have of making my game work on these older systems, since hardly any new MS-DOS releases have been compatible with these machines, like since probably the early 1990s. Anyway, this machine also has a CGA composite output on the back, so you can connect a color monitor or television, and you'll get the full 16 colors if the game supports Composite Mode, which mine does. And not only does it work, but it looks fantastic. I mean, this is how it has looked on every IBM machine I've tried it on so far. It looks great, and I keep asking myself, why do so few software titles support this mode? Well, I think I may have found part of the answer. I discovered a lot of clone machines don't work right. For example, my Laser 128 will run the game in composite mode, but often come up with bizarre colors. In fact, it's somewhat random because I can reboot the thing and it'll come up with a different set of colors. Well, let me explain what I believe is going on. If you look at the video signal being generated by these computers and imagine this is the pixel clock, and there's another signal in a composite video feed, which is the color clock or color burst or whatever. Anyway, on a true IBM CGA card, these are always synced like this at every single boot, so the color clock happens once every 4 pixels. So, by arranging the pixels in different ways, you get 16 possible combinations, creating 16 artifact colors. The trouble is, some machines, like my Laser 128, will lock these in one of 4 random positions at boot up. And you never know which one it's going to be either. And this was really frustrating, as it could make the video boot up in all sorts of weird colors, and the only thing I could do was reboot the machine and hope for the best. I had a 25% chance of getting the right palette. However, eventually I had an idea. Even though there's no way to change the synchronization of the color signal from software, I do have control over the pixels, right? So let me show you what I did. In the last video, I showed you how in standard 4-color mode, you could change the color palette between cool and warm CGA color palettes. Well, in composite mode, that menu option had no effect. So what I did was I changed the code so that in composite mode, it will shift all of the pixels on the screen over by 1. And so if it still doesn't look right, just push it again. It'll rotate back around every 4 times. But one of the options should fix everything so that it looks right, or at least close to right. My Tandy 1000 also suffers from a similar problem, only it always starts up with the exact same wrong palette, so pressing this option twice should fix it on a Tandy. Unfortunately, the Tandy just doesn't look as good on composite no matter what. The pixels are somewhat in the wrong places, and I don't know why. However, I'm not terribly concerned since I support the Tandy 16 color graphics mode anyway, so there's no need to use composite on one of these. Anyway, this does suggest at least one possible reason why CGA Composite Mode was never popular, as many clones did start to appear in the early days, but at least I was able to find a way around the problem. However, I had another similar idea. I had recently added the CGA Monochrome Mode as well, and while this doesn't look terribly exciting, it is still playable. And where this comes in particularly handy is on certain old laptops with monochrome LCD screens. Now, many of these laptops start off with the screen being inverted like a photo negative because they felt that it made the text easier to read. But this can be problematic when playing games, and many machines had a special key sequence that could be used to invert the screen for games, and some required a special DOS program, and some there was just nothing you could do. And I decided to make this menu option cause a negative image, which would look crazy on most computers, but on these old laptops it actually corrects it to look right and playable. So the next thing I want to show you is another one of my tools, and you've probably seen this before. I created a tile draw program to help me design the tiles, but this program does so much more than that. You can really change a lot of the behavior of the game from here. For example, each tile you can define things like, can you drive on it, or can you bulldoze it, can you pick it up and move it, etc. Also, you can define what a tile becomes when it's destroyed by changing this attribute here. In fact, many of the bugs I find in the game aren't even in code, but rather I have an attribute set incorrectly in here. Fortunately, it's easy to change. However, over time, my artist Renaud started using his own paint program and simply sending me the tiles as a single set. And so what I did was I created an import feature where I could import the entire set at once from his master image with a single keystroke. And so that's made life a lot easier, but I also had to create different tile editor for every single video mode, including the 2-color CGA Monochrome Mode, as well as the CGA Composite Mode and Tandy modes. Speaking of artwork, I wanted to show you some of the new artwork. I'll select this map called Winter. This is just a test map, but it shows off the Winter graphics tile set. And what's neat about this is each map can load a custom tile set. And it's more than just different tiles, as the tiles can also have different attributes. So, for example, I have snowmen in this map, which has no analogous tile in the other maps. So this gives a lot of flexibility to creating new landscapes. And there's not much here in this Winter map. As I said, it's just mostly a test map. Also, there's a bit of snow on top of some of the buildings here as well. And moving along, this is another map called Desert, and there are a lot of neat features in this tile set as well, but again, this is just a test map, so there isn't a whole lot to see here. In fact, there's the abrupt end of my stream, and here's some minerals crammed up there. And here's what the winter mode looks like in CGA 4-color mode, and I noticed there are a few black tiles, because the tile set is not 100% completed for this mode. And speaking of new graphics, this is probably what everybody's been waiting to see. Last month I created yet another tile draw program, and this one was designed for VGA graphics, and just in time for the finished 256 color artwork that Renaud was working on. It took me about 4 or 5 days to get the tile editor completely converted to work with 256 color VGA graphics, but the great thing is many of the screen drawing routines I had to design here were easily transferable to the game itself. Now, before I show you the game itself, I wanted to mention something else. These are all the different video modes I had planned to support, and the first 4 modes are all handled by the CGA version of the game, even the Tandy mode. And that's because all of these modes use a 16K video RAM configuration, so 99% of the code is the same. There are only a few tweaks required to the code, and mostly it's just having different artwork custom designed for each mode. However, the VGA version needed its own executable. It required quite a bit of modification to the code since the entire memory map is laid out differently, and it took a couple of weeks to get the game working in VGA mode. And now I have 2 entirely different sets of source codes I have to keep up with. Fortunately, most of the code that I'm working on now is stuff like pathfinding routines, which really don't deal with the video card directly, so that means I can simply paste the new code into both sources for the most part. So here's the VGA version of the game that everyone's been waiting to see. Well, it doesn't look too impressive at the menu, and that's because I don't have the VGA menu graphics in from my artist yet. So I just converted the CGA menu graphics for now, but this is actually running in VGA mode, whether it looks like it or not. So let's start the game, and here it is. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of how it looks, and I think most of the credit here goes to Renaud for his awesome artwork. Now, there's a few things I really need to tell you about this version. For one, you may notice these pink-looking areas around some of the units, like my builder, tank, and especially the aliens. And that's because I'm planning to implement transparency, so what you're seeing is sort of like looking at an unfinished special effects shot that are shot in front of a blue screen or a green screen, and I simply haven't added the code yet to fill in the transparent areas. And that's something the CGA version does not do at all, but I felt the VGA version probably should. So for the moment, it looks tacky, but in the next update that should be fully working. Also, I do not have the graphics yet for winter and desert landscapes, so I imported the CGA composite graphics into the VGA version for now. So that's what it looks like for the moment when using maps that depend on those graphics. I'm sure I'll have the completed VGA graphics soon. A lot of people have been asking what sort of CPU would be required to run the VGA version, and I just haven't been able to give an answer to that because I didn't have any code written, so I had no way to really know. Well, now I know. So while the CGA version was designed to work on a 4.77 MHz IBM XT, the VGA version has 4 times as much data to move around, and it really requires at minimum a 286 running at 10 MHz, which is probably fine as it's pretty rare to see VGA running on an XT class machine anyway. However, I do have a video clip here from Lauren, who's one of my testers, and he has it running on an IBM PS2 system in this video, which is a 286 running at 10 MHz, and it does work, although it can be a bit sluggish at times. And when people ask why I'm not supporting EGA or Hercules or Tandy high-res graphics, the main reason is because each of those modes would require a complete conversion with its own executable. And since I'm just one guy, I just decided not to support these modes. Not to say that I couldn't support them in the future, but certainly not in the initial release. Okay, enough about graphics modes. Let's talk about sound and music. Now, in the last video, I kind of put out a help wanted request to see if anybody was willing to code these sound and music routines for me. And I had several people apply for the job, but I ended up hiring Alex Shiru Simonov, who is a veteran programmer for sound and music on a variety of different platforms. And I had a decision to make about how to support music across multiple platforms. And I wanted to support the PC speaker with its one voice, and then the Tandy 3-voice sound system, along with the AdLib, which has 9 voices. And I wanted to be able to use essentially the same tunes for each device. Now, I knew that with advanced programming, you could get at least 2 more phantom voices out of the PC speaker. And this is done by alternating the voices quickly to create an illusion of multiple voices. So what I decided to do was draw a line at 3 voices. And I felt like 3 would be enough, and this way all 3 supported devices would be able to play the same tunes. Plus, we can use some of the extra voices on the AdLib card for sound effects. And for the PC speaker, well, we'll just have to alternate between music or sound effects. And the Tandy is an interesting case. After all, it still has a PC speaker, which can act as a 4th voice. So we'll probably use that for sound effects here as well. And this was actually a common design back in the day. In fact, Ultima 6 uses the PC speaker for all sound effects, no matter what card you have for music. So I want to show you the tracker that Alex has designed. This one tracker supports all 3 sound cards. And one thing it does for the PC speaker, though, is that different tracks get different priority over the one voice. So the leftmost channel here is given the least priority. And if anything comes across in the middle, then it's given a higher priority. And of course, the right channel gets the highest priority. So I'll show you how this sounds. He's composed one demo song with the tracker. And okay. So right now you're hearing the PC speaker. It's pretty impressive for a one-voice setup. Okay, let's listen to the Tandy 3-voice version. This sounds noticeably better, especially on sustained notes. And finally, here's the AdLib version. Not bad for only using 3 voices. Now all that needs to be done is to integrate the sound and music routines into the actual source code of the game itself, which I hope to happen sometime in the next month or so. Alright, and the last thing I wanted to mention, since a lot of people have been asking, there were only originally 500 box copies of Planet X2 for the Commodore 64. And due to minimum order quantities, I've never ordered any more than that. However, one of the options in the Kickstarter was the Deluxe version, which comes with a copy of Planet X2. And there were 836 people that selected this option, which really surprised me. Well, I knew I had enough pre-orders then to go ahead and order separate boxes for Planet X2. So I already ordered 1,000 boxes for Planet X2, so that means I can sell around 163 copies to those who might have missed out on the original box copy. Plus, I also have more disc labels and manuals on the way, so I'll be able to sell more light copies as well. But what about the discs themselves? Well, just today I invited some people over where we had a little disc copy party. We all set up our Commodore machines and made copies of Planet X2 while eating pizza and generally having a good time. So discs are ready. And I imagine we'll be doing something similar when the code is finished for Planet X3, only we'll have MS-DOS machines set up instead. So, to answer the question about when I'm going to get more Planet X2 in stock, well, they're coming real soon. Hopefully in the next week or two, you'll be able to buy that again. Now, to answer the next 2 questions, which is, what if you missed out on the Kickstarter for Planet X3? A lot of people seem to think that was the only way to get one, and I just wanted to confirm that those will be for sale after the fact. So, even if you didn't get in on the Kickstarter, you'll still be able to get a copy of it. So, don't worry about that. And, of course, people are wanting to know when Planet X3 might actually be done. And that I don't know yet. I'm really kind of hoping by the end of the year, so maybe around December or so. Can't make any promises, but that's the current plan. So anyway, that about wraps this video up. So stick around till the next one, and thanks for watching.